On today's episode of Curve Ahead, I am joined by Trevor, the COO of OpenDrives. Trevor, welcome to the show. Do you mind introducing yourself?
Absolutely pleased to do so, Brian. My name is Trevor Morgan. I am the Chief Operating Officer at OpenDrives. OpenDrives is an enterprise data storage provider, and I've got a little bit now of a history with OpenDrives, but have had a long career in technology, both on the software and hardware side, and I'm happy to get into any of that with you. But I'm based in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, but OpenDrives is based in Culver City, California.
What's it like to be so far? Let me back up. Does OpenDrives have a physical office? Because I know a lot of people have like mailing offices, but no real physical office.
Great question. We do have a physical office in Culver City. And when we all meet up in Los Angeles area, we will go there. A number of people will show up at the office. Obviously, we have a lot of our equipment there. Our primary market is the media and entertainment market. So we are in the center of where all of our users are. And that's how the company grew up. But over the past 5 years, and Brian, I'm sure you've heard this story over and over again, with the pandemic and the aftermath of that, the company grew to incorporate people who are in remote locations. So we have people in Colorado, we have people up the West Coast, and even people on the East Coast. I'm included in that. But you would think of those areas like Boston, where you have a good body of people who are in the tech industry to recruit from and to bring in. So we're truly now across the United States, but the headquarters are in Culver City. And we still do business from time to time there, bring partners and customers in.
So you touched on something that I haven't really dove in with anybody, but if we can take like a minute or two to just talk about it, I would love to. So there recently has been a major push to back to office by a lot of organizations. And I think that there's kind of two viewpoints on that. One, that it's great for morale, culture, and being able to ensure that productivity is happening. Mm-hmm. However, I think the other viewpoint on that is that there's a higher financial implication on doing so, but there's also, you're restricting your talent pool from being able to have further reaches of an organization. So I'm curious, as a COO of an organization, like what is your viewpoint? And this could be your personal viewpoint on this. Like, where's your stance?
Yeah, interesting. So I actually was working remotely for many years prior to the pandemic. I think when that really hit everybody in terms of, oh no, I need to go out and get a webcam and start doing work remotely. So in some of my previous positions, I was at companies like Cisco. Cisco has been promoting this for quite a long time. And so I was very used to working remotely. A lot of people in the tech space are used to that. And I'm going to actually, here's a little bit of a personal opinion. In many of the places where I worked, facilities, say in Northern Virginia, a lot of people would go into the office. That was just sort of the thing we did. We would slog through an hour worth of traffic and get there. And that would not necessarily guarantee productivity. Lots of people gathering in the hallways, doing the hour and a half lunch, coming back, leaving early because of traffic. And on the other side of it, and my wife also works remotely for a very large global organization. And we talk about this back and forth. Do you remember the times when we would spend 2 to 3 hours in our car? Now it takes us a minute to get to our offices, and the company is actually able to extract more work and more productivity from us, with a caveat, Brian. It depends upon two things: the worker and his or her ability to function in this remote environment, reducing distractions, as well as really leaning in. A component of this is the organization having a culture that promotes remote work, that really attempts to make it convenient, do fun things. Maybe it's a happy hour from time to time. We do all of those things, but it really comes down to, you have employees who are used to this, who can be very productive while doing it. And then that other component I referred to was the management part of it. As managers and directors and VPs, we all have to make sure that the most important thing isn't just minutes and hours at a desk, it's the output. And if you have management and workers who are all committed to that, it can work swimmingly.
Yeah, I would agree. Back to like that commuting point, that being in the office point, like I know that in an earlier life, I worked for the federal government as a contractor, and our office actually went hybrid. So we did a flex schedule. It was 2 days, like 3 days on site, 2 days off, and it changed every other week. Really, the original idea there was to cut down on the footprint required to house and facilitate all these federal workers who were coming into these federal buildings. But I I know what you're talking about when it comes, like, when I was in office, I did spend more time like catching up with friends, like face to face, versus actually being productive. And now that I'm fully remote, I'm more likely to have like an email come through after hours, look at it quickly and be like, oh, I can take care of this in 3 minutes. I'm just going to do it right now.
Yep.
So there's, with that said, anybody who's new to remote work, please establish very clear boundaries with how you want to be treated inside of work hours and outside of work hours. That's my only caveat.
That's a great point, and you can get lost in work. I mean, there's always the whole, you see it on sitcoms, the person who's, working remotely and is hardly working. I see it as more often the person who gets pulled in 11, 12 hours a day, and suddenly you have a burnout situation. And our director of human resources, she puts in a lot of time thinking about how do we strike the right balance, because we are caretakers of our number one asset. Our number one asset, it happens to be our people. And we obviously need the outcomes, but we want their careers to grow and we want them to have a balance. We really do. And so we do try to do those functions that allow us all to interact and really know each other. And sometimes I've been told myself, hey, maybe you should take an afternoon off just to kind of clear your head, or I'm looking at your schedule, it looks really busy. And that's really a responsibility of management. It's not to squeeze the last ounce of work out of people, it's to strike that right balance. And we don't do it perfectly, and sometimes we fail at it, but we really think about it a lot.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think as a manager, as an operator, you have to think about your team and organization as a whole and ensuring that it stays healthy and happy. So let's take a step back, change the topic a little bit. So, can you give me like a 15,000-foot overview of OpenDrives, what it is that they do, who it is that they work with? You had mentioned media and entertainment, but can you just go a little bit further into what you're doing there?
Sure. I'm going to cycle all the way back to just after the aughts, so the 2010, 2011 era. And some Hollywood technologists, very intelligent technical people who were involved in supporting very groundbreaking directors as these people were working with new techniques and new technologies like 4K. I mean, we hear 4K now, you hear 8K now, but back then we're talking about very difficult media to work with. And these technologists, to support the creation of these pieces of entertainment, whether it was a show or a movie, found that enterprise data storage. So, I mean, we all deal with storage. Your laptop, my laptop, it's got an internal drive. We've worked in offices, most people have, where people go, oh, that's on the shared drive. That's what we're talking about, are these larger enterprise grade pieces of machinery that have lots of disk drives or flash drives in them that are accessible to small teams, medium teams, large teams. Sometimes they're not even co-located. They could be around the world. That's what the problem was with these technologists, is when you're working with media that difficult, multiple or many people hitting these projects at the same time, you started having a lockup. You couldn't get the work done. I'm sure you're familiar with things like Premiere Pro to cut up video and do the right work, to do either the editing or the coloring, whatever. And so these technologists looked around at the major vendors and said, none of these will solve our problems. So in the true spirit of technologists, they assembled it themselves. They assembled hardware and then created, using a lot of open source and then stitching it together, the software to run what we call a NAS, a network attached storage device. For folks who aren't technically minded, that's that big thing that may be sitting in a rack somewhere and it's got lots of disks. but you have to have software that's also orchestrating all of the input and output. They created their own because they couldn't buy what they needed. And as you know, an area like media and entertainment, Hollywood, wow, you solved your own problem. Can you make one for me too? And can you make one for my friend? And suddenly we became a company. So from that point to this, we have traditionally been a vendor of the hardware and software experience. The hardware, because we would pick and choose the right hardware that worked for us, and then also create and evolve the software needed to be on top of it for a complete solution. Now, fast forward to the pandemic and the aftermath. What we really found in the industry, and I'm sure you've seen this, Brian, hardware has become commoditized. What used to be super duper expensive and was the thing of focus. And I always go back to decades ago when people would say, the new Intel chip has come out. It was all about hardware driving the experience and the performance. We know now that it is software. Software is very easily adapted, and it really is where the intelligence is. So over the past 3 to 4 years, we've been on a journey to really depend upon our hardware partners to design the hardware. And we are now a purely software focused organization because that's where the intelligence is. And that's where we can add new innovation rapidly. So OpenDrives is still focused primarily in the M&E market, though we have customers outside of it, on the problem of highly performant data storage. But even now, we are moving beyond that into new products because you're solving problems not just on the storing data and retrieving data, but you have an entire infrastructure above that. And so we are writing new software for a new product to address those problems higher up on the infrastructure stack. That's what OpenDrives does. Once upon a time, it was a big NAS that was sitting there for your small group of editors. And now we're solving lots of problems across the data ecosystem.
So if you don't mind, I would assume that the problems that you're trying to solve are synchronicity of having multiple people interact with similar pieces of information or data, especially with media and entertainment, where you may have 6 or more editors in the same piece of data, essentially, whether that be video, audio, what have you, doing edits to it and then putting it all back together. So is that like the number one thing that you're trying to overcome?
That's exactly it. It is all of those projects are group efforts. And some of those group efforts can be very large teams. Each sub team could be doing different parts with, let's call it the project. And with the pandemic, you suddenly had this problem of, we can't have our editors in the same place anymore. So now we need to do it remotely, and different people have different connectivity issues. I'm sure you've been on a Zoom call where somebody says, my Wi-Fi is getting a little flaky here. And how do you get work done? Well, you can assure it, number one, by making sure that where your data sits, when a request comes in to either save information or retrieve it and push it out, that it is done not only very, very rapidly with high performance, but what our software does is even start to understand, hey, I'm going to make this up, some editor in Nebraska is starting to play this 4K video moving forward. I'll bet this person is going to need the next bit of footage and the next one after that. So it becomes very predictive, and it starts loading the future aspects of that media that the editor may get to in 10 seconds or 30 seconds into cache. So it starts anticipating the different users and making sure that it is rapidly available. It's not having to hit the slower disk. It's going right to the memory where that has been cached. And so we found in the pandemic and afterward that the ways that we were treating data and being very predictive in terms of what the users were doing helped at that time. And now that we're past that, more and more shops have remained, at least to use your word, in a hybrid stance. And we've just gone from there with not only the high performance, but also some of the other major issues that our users are grappling with, whether it's security, whether it's growing their hardware estate, and maybe not just what we call scaling up, meaning making it faster and faster, but scaling out because we want 10 of these across the world. And so it becomes a scale up problem and a scale out problem. That's how our company has evolved. And really, it did pivot around the last 5 years when the workplace and the face of the workplace changed and became, I love your word, it became a hybrid workplace. And our technology was at the right place at the right time.
It's kind of funny how that happens as an entrepreneur and an operator, just having your product at the right place at the right time to find people who like really lean into it and be like, oh, wow, I didn't realize like I could do X, Y, or Z with whatever's available. And then one thing that I forget. I was watching a video from a huge founder the other day. His name eludes me, but he was saying that the number one marketing tool for him was word of mouth. Like that's gold, right?
Absolutely.
Beyond that, it's like, okay, yeah, I've got to do marketing, regular marketing, but like that referral and ensuring that you're getting word of mouth referrals from customer to customer and building that trust and rapport was like his goal. That was his number one thing when it came to marketing. It sounds like you guys had a similar opportunity, right place, right time. A lot of really good word of mouth referrals, continue to build that trust with your clients.
Absolutely. And as you were saying those very true statements, two things popped into my mind. The first goes back to our backstory. I've been in technology now for 30 years, and I am endlessly amazed at the technologists who see a problem like our founders did and said, I'm not going to just go and purchase something that may not meet my needs. I'm going to purpose build something to solve this problem in the best way possible. And that's why we continue to watch this moving on and on and on, this forward movement of technology. It is very proactive attempts to make something better. But when you move beyond that, then you do get the word of mouth where somebody goes, wow, that's neat. I want that too. And I'll say this, we just got back from our largest show of the year. It's NAB. It's the large broadcaster show in Las Vegas. And we had a large booth presence. I alluded to the fact that we do have our main flagship software, and we're coming out with a new product to solve different problems. And people were coming by our booth saying just what you said. I was talking to somebody and that person said that I needed to come check out OpenDrives and your flagship product. But in the process, I heard about this new product, and I'm nearly quoting. Let me say I'm paraphrasing somebody who visited. And I actually said, can I get the camera and record that for you so I can play this at our next board meeting? He said, through this word of mouth, I'm here, and now I'm seeing something else, and nobody else on this hall, and it was a very large hall, is talking about this and solving this problem. So you're absolutely right. The main way to grow your company is to leverage the very intelligent people, both business and technology oriented, and the fascinating problems that they can solve. And then to ensure that your customers and your prospects respect what you're doing because you're solving their problems and they want to talk about you. You can do all of the ad work during the Super Bowl that you want, but having your customers be advocates is how you keep your company going and how you grow your company.
So let me ask you then, being a younger entrepreneur, like how would I go about creating something for my customers other than solving their problem, but creating an experience, what have you, that elicits my customers wanting to talk about it or wanting to share their experience with working with me without me having to go, hey, do you mind doing this case study with me?
Yeah, that's always the very difficult proposition, because I like to explain this a lot to people. A lot of this just comes down to human behavior. Your customers have a problem, and the moment you solve their problem, then they're on to another problem. And how do you catch them so that you're not saying, hey, wait, come back over here and now kind of market for me or help me evolve my product, but also give them the opportunity to gush. And that's that's always a very difficult thing to do. So you see in companies these efforts along the lines of customer success or customer outreach, having advisory boards, coming up with ways to cooperate with your customers moving forward without turning it into a homework assignment for them. I'll be very, very honest. Business is always, you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours as well. Can you, as you're working a deal, go, hey, and we can make this even more price efficient for you, but can you help us out a little bit? Very often a customer will go, wow, you're going to take 5 more points off. That's worth 2 hours of my marketing person's time. So that's the very transactional way to do it. But you also need to be very curious about your customers and go, great, we've solved your problem. What other problems might you have? Because maybe we can help you solve them, or maybe we know of intriguing ways that you haven't thought of. And that's the back and forth dialogue. The worst vendors are the ones who do a transaction and go, okay, book it. It's on our books. We'll talk to you in 3 years when we think that that's done. But treating your customers with an eye, not to your business problems, but to their business problems, and knowing when to engage and when to be hands off and when to solicit their advice. And that's the last thing I'm going to stop with, Brian. I've found throughout my years in technology that if you simply give your prospects and your customers the time and respect to talk about what's in, sometimes they just want to unburden themselves. Like, this is all, I do this every day. I come in and I go, I've got a lot of things I got to solve. And this is helpful for me right here because I'm now talking about this, and you can often find ways to find further business with your customers or really instill in them when they are somewhere else, like, hey, that person or that company over there, they didn't treat me like a transaction. They treat me like a partner. And if you can do that, I believe we call it consultative selling, but take it one step further. You are on a journey with them. And sometimes you have to be hands off. Sometimes you have to dip in and just check in. And I find that that's probably the best way to do it. And if you give those people the floor to say, what's on your mind? 8 times out of 10, they'll go, let me tell you what's on my mind. 2 out of 10, they'll say, I don't even have the time. And that's totally cool. I'll check in later. I hope that answers the question, but that's what I found is the most successful way to do it.
No, I think that you definitely hit the nail on the head, right? Like it is giving them the runway to speak their mind without real judgment, trying to understand where they are with your product and their other problems. Is there an intersection where you can continue to help them and expand your business with them and increase your stickiness in their mind as a service provider or a partner?
Absolutely. I love that word stickiness too. And that's what it is literally sticking in their mind when they're somewhere else. They'll either go, I need to circle back around with them and see what they're up to, or if they can solve this problem, or it's simply, you know who you should go talk to. And we get this every time we go to a show. Somebody was talking about you and said we should come and talk to you. I was having a conversation over there, and now I'm here because somebody referred me. And that's when you know you are, at least in my opinion, doing business the right way. If all you're trying to do is exchange cash or digital cash and then walk away with a transaction, you can do that. But having a true partnership takes work. And sometimes it can even be frustrating because when they have a serious problem with your technology, all technology has flaws. There may be times when they're really upset because you've caused the problem when you were trying to solve the problem. We've been there multiple times, and you can't evade that. And when you finally lean in and go, wow, that was our bad, we're fixing it, they'll even say, that wasn't the best experience I've ever had, with technology, but the way that you were there for us, that cemented our impression of you. So you don't have to be perfect. You have to be there and committed to that journey and that relationship.
Well, not only that, I think the other thing there is you have to be honest with yourself and with your customers, right? Like if there's a problem, you have to admit that there's a problem first, right? You can't just be like, oh, well, this was a feature or you have to address it. Hey, look, some bad code got pushed out in our last push. apologize. This is impacted. This is what we're doing. This is our timeline to remedy it. And staying in front of the customer and just being honest, I think shows the type of business you are. Like I've worked in both types of businesses where it's like, okay, can we bury this for the next 3 days until we have it fixed? And then I've worked with other businesses where like, hey, our bad. This happened. We're sending out a release to like all of our customers who are impacted by the end of the day on when it happens and provide very clear steps on the workaround, what's impacted and when we anticipate having it fixed. So like, I don't know. I mean, obviously you want to be honest and forthcoming with everybody, but I think sometimes organizations can be too honest and forthcoming, but that's a whole different discussion.
That's exactly it. I'm thinking of a moment over 20 years ago when I was on site with a customer and I was being told by my management, just get outside and get through the parking lot and get away. And I will never forget that moment of being told like, we'll deal with this later. And I remember seeing the customer as we were driving away out there because we had uncovered something massive that we weren't prepared to talk about. And that always sticks in my mind of then how we had to try to repair that. And from that point on, whether it is a great situation or whether it's an awful situation, I want to be there and be present. I want the company to be there and be present. And I love your word. And just be honest. Sometimes you have to be discreet. Sometimes you have to say, we don't have a fix right. We're working on this. And you will be amazed at how people are very reasonable and say, okay, I've got this amount of time, but just so you know, I understand things don't have to be perfect. And that was a formative moment for me. And I've always been dedicated to telling people, look, I'm from Texas. I try to be respectful, but I want to be direct and blunt. And here's the situation. And and I say that a lot, and people will respond with, okay, they're going to tell me the way it is. And you then get down to a different nuance of the relationship. And going through difficult things together can make a relationship stronger. It just comes down to, are you honest? And do they trust you? If you can maintain that, then I doubt that you'll be in a situation where they're just going to abandon you as a customer.
Yeah. It brings to mind your reputation and credibility is kind of like a bank account, right? Like you continue to make deposits with that person in their mind, but as soon as you kind of break that trust, all of that you built up, all the trust you built up, that bank account's depleted. Right. And it's really hard to build that back.
That's exactly it. And as long as you're mindful of that and you do see that as something to keep as filled up as possible, that's when you realize, wow, I haven't reached out in a month. I should just ping and say hi. And even that will just fill up a little bit so that when things do get a little tense or you're trying to solve something difficult, it's a partnership. Yes, they're the customer, but it's a partnership.
But it also gives them a clear avenue of communication, right? Exactly. Like that quick reach out, there could have already been some tension on their side and be like, hey, if you have 10 minutes, can we chat about this? And be like, yeah, absolutely. Here's my availability, or I can clear my calendar. Let's just talk.
That's precisely it.
Yeah. So what do you see the organization's biggest challenge in 2025, 2026? And in what steps is OpenDrive taking to kind of overcome those as you see them come up?
That, Brian, is a great question, because when I say that our primary industry is media and entertainment, you probably know from the past few years that has been an industry, I don't like to say turmoil, although when you have strikes, you have turmoil, but it is an industry that is evolving. And it evolves not only because of what consumers demand and consumer habits. We've watched it. I haven't been in a theater actually, I did go to a theater. That's not correct. It was a special showing. But other than that, I just look for the latest stream. And even that changes the media and the entertainment experience. And it just shows that it is in evolution. So combining things like strikes with the changing tastes and habits of the consumers, media and entertainment has been very, very stressed as an industry. And as a technology company wanting to support them, we've had to adapt rapidly to their technology needs, as well as, quite frankly, we've had to face some of the downturns with them. When you have a major strike, suddenly groups aren't buying, and when they're not, they may be looking at their data storage equipment going, we can squeeze another 6 months out of that. I'm sure you've done that with a car or a bike. I think I can go 6 more months on those tires. And then what do you do? And that has been challenging for us. And while all of the evolutions in media and entertainment were going on, we as a company were making this transition from a focus on the hardware and the software primarily to the software. So we were doing a strategic change. And so that became very challenging for our organization in the aftermath of 2020 and 2021 to navigate. As part of that, we began work on new technologies, solving new problems, first as sort of incubator style, let's call it tinkering around. Like, hey, here's a completely different problem. And this problem doesn't just exist in M&E. It does in M&E, and we confirmed it with some of our largest customers, but it goes elsewhere. So we as a company had the challenge of, we have a primary industry. Is it time once and for all to become multi-industry? You probably know what the challenges are there, Brian. You go into a different industry, they work with data differently. You need either to have ongoing training of existing staff. Most of our staff understands media and entertainment very well, or maybe you're going to have to augment with different types of salespeople, different types of support people, and maybe even software engineers. And so as we've been incubating a new product that moves beyond data storage and that is very applicable for other industries that haven't been suffering quite from the evolutionary pains that M&E has been sustaining, we've found ourselves looking at this going, are we doing the right thing? Is this the right time? To do this takes investment. To do this takes forethought and planning. And that becomes an operational challenge because those things take away from your core business. If your core business has been even moderately hurting because of what I just described to you, saying, well, then I'm going to expand over here, and that's going to defocus some or a large portion of the company, that's a gamble. And when you have a gamble like that, you have to be clear with your board and your shareholders and other stakeholders, your partners. We have a lot of partner firms. Many of them are M&E focused. Are they going to be involved in this? Or are they like, wait, what are you doing? Are you abandoning us? Are you going to solve somebody else's problems? So a myriad amount of problems confronted us over the last year as we went from incubator to confirming that, yes, we need to be a multi-product company and we can do this. But Brian, we've been doing this without hiring new staff, with managing everybody's expectations from the market, our customers, our prospects, our partners, to our shareholders and our board, and going, we have this well under, this is not a pipe dream, but some of this is, I mean, you are in flight and you're building out the airplane in flight. And that's the nature of a company like ours that is smaller. We still call ourselves a startup, even though we've been around since 2011. 2014, I believe, was when we incorporated. And we think like a startup. And some of this is very, very risky. And I don't think I'm stretching the truth to say, many evenings I think about this as I stare at the ceiling fan going, is this decision or is that decision or this bit of communication or that the right thing to do? And I'm going to punctuate this with, at that show a few weeks ago in Las Vegas, where everybody knows us for data storage in the M&E space, we decided we are going to start talking about this new product that comes out in August called Astraeus. Our flagship is Atlas. And that in and of itself is daunting because people immediately go, wait, what are you doing here? And we got great reception, but every step along the way, you're having to manage internal anxiety and external anxiety. And for an organization to do that means that you are taking on something really, really difficult. And if it pays off, it's going to be worth it. And if it doesn't seem to evidently pay off, you're going to have to pivot fast. So it does leave you often with sleepless nights and difficult conversations, but better that than sitting in an office and playing. I remember decades ago, people used to play Minesweeper. I'd rather be solving tough problems and losing some sleep on a gamble that may convert our company into something 2 years from now that we won't even recognize. That's how companies evolve and grow.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I've had a very similar conversation with a few different organizational leaders, whether it be solopreneurs like myself or people who are running VC-backed firms that are solving really big problems. Like, there is always that moment of introspection where you're thinking, am I going about this the right way? How do I, am I positioning right? Am I communicating properly? So it doesn't matter. It's just part of how it is. You could be running a 100,000 person organization and you're still going to have these same thoughts. I think that is one of the things that as you grow in an organization and go towards the top of it, these are the always kind of internal nagging conversations you have with yourself, because you're thinking about yourself as well as the organization, because it's really an organism that it grows separate from you. So you impart as much as you can into it, but there's also a part of it that just kind of grows organically. Yeah. And you just kind of continue to feed it and make sure that what you're doing is providing it food and light and whatever else it needs to grow, like it was its own organism.
You're touching on something that I like to point out to people, which is when you think about a corporation, a corpus, it legally, it is an entity. It is a thing that is which is separate from the actual people who are a part of it. It is this thing that is trying to survive and grow, and it survives and grows by repaying what's giving it sustenance, your shareholder, and it eats, in terms of creating value and getting revenue and maybe eating other organisms. It is a fascinating way to look at business. And some people I hear lament that. It's like, there are other places to go where this is not necessarily as poignant of a reality, but in business, this is why a company that may be making billions of dollars a year may look at a division and go, I'm sorry, we're laying off 2,000 people. It is looking at a situation and going, to survive long term, have to jettison this. And if you can't handle that, it is a tough reality. Laying people off or being laid off is the toughest thing that you can possibly face. But to blame a company or a corporation, you have to see why corporations are doing that. They're doing it because they're looking long term. And when you look at it that way, it takes the emotion out. And then as you get into a company and its inner workings, I love the way you said that, Brian. You're part of this living thing and you're helping it grow. And that's the excitement of being in a company and maybe managing a company, as I'm doing, is the thrill of, are we doing all the right things to make it grow? If not, I'll have to answer for that. If we do grow, then that's a victory, but then we move on to the next thing because it never stops.
Well, it goes back to that. How do I catch that customer at that moment of convergence when you're solving that problem?
Exactly. And it's co-opetition. You have other organisms out there and they're trying to do the same thing. And can they be your customers? Can you be other people's customers? Can you partner? Can you cooperate? Can you compete and cooperate at the same time? The endless combinations are fascinating. And that's why many of us love business and love the technology business in particular, because it is a very vibrant place to work and usually not a dull moment.
That is so true. Trevor, you've been a great guest. At the end of each one of my episodes, I give all of my guests 90 seconds to plug anything that they're passionate about. So in your case, that could be OpenDrives, that can be anything. So without further ado, the next 90 seconds are yours.
Thank you, Brian. I've appreciated this opportunity. And what I like to say is that we work for, my colleagues and I work for a company, OpenDrives, that is really committed to solving problems, and not just problems, but going back to our founders, trying to solve hard problems that other organizations go, wow, that's really difficult. And so we're just kind of let that be and let somebody else come along and solve that. And that's really, as I look at the tech industry, as we hear a lot of buzz about AI and all sorts of other technologies that scare people or excite people, this is really a manifestation of, we as a species, we can't stop looking around at our world and looking around at our activities and just going, there's a problem. Can we solve it? Sometimes we solve it with the wrong solution, in which case you've got a new problem that needs to be solved. But at the end of the day, our company loves to be part of this, loves to be part of our customers' hard problems. And we like to do that not by creating a walled garden of, hey, when you use us, you can't use anything else. We use open source technologies that we stitch together with our own IP. We love open protocols. We love working with other companies. We don't look at everybody as a competitor. We look at larger organizations as, hey, come work with us. Let's all solve these problems for customers, ultimately for humanity. We're pushing all of this into an interesting world where every bit of information is at your fingertips on demand, and that makes it worth it for us. So that's kind of a plug, not just for my company, but just for technology in general. We hope we're a force for good. We're always trying to reassess it, but we'll see next year and the year after that, right?
I love it. Thank you so much for your time today.
I appreciate it, Brian.